Hey, Lance.
Hey, Beth Starr.
I'm Brett Starr. I'm the CEO and founder of The Starr Conspiracy. He's Lance Hahn,
Vice President of Market Insights at The Starr Conspiracy.
How you doing today, Lance?
Doing great. It's sunny. It's 75 degrees here in Portland, which is pretty much heaven on earth.
Yeah, and here's the inversion. It's like 50 degrees and rainy and cold in Texas.
We can just send that shit down to you all.
Yeah. Well, to your point in your newsletter this week, which everyone should sign up for, we'll drop it in the description. Sign up for Lance's weekly newsletter called Work Leader Weekly. It's a newsletter for work leaders. And you really dove into this notion of may you live in interesting times, and where that saying comes from, and is it a curse or is it a blessing?
Yeah, totally.
May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, I want to live in precedented times, as I wrote.
Yeah, I want to live in super boring times.
Just for a year. Would that be great?
It would be really great.
Just a year break.
Yeah. Speaking of living in super boring times and our desire to do so, I think we've decided to kind of touch the third rail today and talk about a topic that no one wants to talk about, no one should talk about, but everyone has to talk about. And when I say no one, should talk about, it's because it's guaranteed to piss somebody off, and it's guaranteed no matter what I say today. And so I'm not going to be careful. I'm just going to say what, I feel and what I mean. But we're going to be talking about, I would say inclusion, I guess. And I would say, just kind of how to manage being a business while also managing, how to interact with the culture wars, and no matter what I say, no matter where the conversation goes, I'm probably going to piss off at least, 10% of people in a way where they're going to judge me personally. And, probably piss off 30 or 40% of people in a mild way. And then, there's going to be, really strong reactions on the other side as well. And people are going to assume I'm liberal. People are going to assume I'm conservative. People are like, I'll cards straight up. I'm incredibly liberal, number one. But number two, one of the most interesting experiences in my professional career is being, kind of broadly assumed to be uber conservative. By the people at the Starr Conspiracy, and by people out in the market.
Absolutely.
And, it's interesting as a business owner and a CEO when you learn that people's perception of you is so different than how you self-identify, and like what that means in terms of, just kind of perceptions of business owners and CEOs in general, but also the perception of business interests, kind of over individual interests. And so it's a real, hot topic. I'll tell you why I wanted to talk about this today. I mean, obviously there's a bunch of stuff going on out in the world that's just really polarizing for people predominantly around social issues. But I put out a statement, I don't know, months ago, that was around, the Starr Conspiracy's position on different social issues. And basically what I said is like the Starr Conspiracy believes in a big tent. We still believe, I still believe strongly in a world where people who have different political ideologies can come together and have meaningful conversations. And there's a pay dirt in human relationships that does not center around even deeply held views on social issues and personal issues. I think that that was not super well received by everyone. It was well received by some, but, other folks, it took a minute, to really kind of figure out what I was saying, because it seemed like I was punting on some significant social issues, including Roe v. Wade and the overturn of Roe v. Wade, where there was a real, strong perception that if you do not believe the way I believe on this issue, then, you're basically, first of all, wrong. But second of all, not really engaging with this the right way to even call it a social issue is wrong on both sides of that equation. It's like, it's not a social issue. It's a matter of life and death. I mean, both both ends of the spectrum feel very strongly that this transcends the notion of a social issue. I just really wanted to dive back into that because, work leaders, and I'm going to shut up for a minute, but, work leaders are in a tough position. You know, how do you meet people where they are? How do you let them know that they're supported? That inclusion is for everyone. I mean, that's the definition of inclusion, in my opinion. While also not pissing off the other people who, you know, believe in something different,
That's right.
and also trying to get work done and, you know, not piss off your customers.
That's right.
So I don't know, man, this is like the fact that I have to think about this as a business owner above and beyond, you know, like how
the other things you gotta do. Yeah. Right.
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying it's different.
Yeah.
It wasn't like this. It wasn't like this 20 years ago when I started the agency.
Yeah.
And it's just become progressively more so that the stakes and the perception of making a misstep from a communications perspective around social issues can, you know, put you out of business, you know, can cause, you know, just all these terrible things to happen to an organization that's different. It's different now. So what are people supposed to do?
Yeah. I mean, fairly new, but not, I think a lot of people have spoken about, I mean, it's a particularly difficult political environment. Lots of identity is sort of wrapped up in that. Nobody wants to, you know, really kind of dive on that grenade, and I get it. I always relate. I relate to this story. My last HR job was when the 2008 election happened, and you know we had a organization-wide like intercom where you can make announcements and that sort of thing. I remember whenever after John McCain conceded that election, somebody got on the intercom, and of course there's no way to, like, it's just an ancient system, like it's barely worked. So there's no way to track this, but like somebody, you know, got on and said, "Fuck Obama." And like, you know, we heard like all through the offices, we heard like, yeah, like just because it's a blue collar, like it's a very working class organization. I'm the HR person in that situation. I'm like, fuck, this ruined my week. Like I knew exactly what was going to happen because you know, we had people in the organization that like, we don't need to even like figure out who this was. Like it was a joke. It's funny. Like most people agreed with them anyway. So don't worry about it. And like other people are like, this is offensive. I think it's part of the racial problem that we had there. And so it is, I don't think anybody feels like, I mean, and nobody should feel bad like for like CEOs and like work leaders having to do this, but to your point, it's part of the dynamic of doing this, and knowing that there's not a right answer that's going to make everybody happy. And so, I think when we talked about this, you know, I mean, I think when we initially talked about this, I'm glad we're readdressing it too, because, you know, I would definitely do things differently than you would have done, but that's also part of being a leader, is sort of like going back to what's your vision, what's your, you know, what's your purpose as an organization, and really having to be comfortable with what that is. Right. And so like, yeah, people can agree or disagree with the challenge. We know that not everybody's going to like it. Once you accept that, like 10% are going to absolutely hate it, probably anywhere between 20 and 40% might just like disagree, but it's not a life-altering thing. I don't know. It's sort of, it makes the decision like making a little bit easier, doesn't it? I mean, like as a work leader, when I look through it that lens, I'm able to go back to, you know, in that situation, go to our CEO and founder, like, is this the type of environment you wanted to create when you thought about running this, a place where stuff like this is okay? Because if that's the case, then we should be clear about that. And if it's not, then we should be. We should be clear that it's not okay. Or you could also be quiet about it and then kind of just let people make up their own minds about it. But leaving it open to interpretation, I think after Roe v. Wade got overturned, I think the appetite for that sort of stuff kind of went out the window. Everybody just kind of figured out, okay, people are expecting us to talk about this, even if we don't want to. So let's not make a marketing statement. Let's not make a PR statement. Let's make something that's actually true to our organization. I think that's what the best organizations have done. And it's painful because, it's there's also like a level of candor and missteps that you could do when you're communicating that can absolutely make it even more difficult to make that difficult communication. So that's been my experience. I don't, like I said, I don't think there's, I don't know if there's anything I would have changed about like that particular situation I dealt with, but like, it's not easy.
Well,
it's like I said, nobody's going to feel bad because it's something that you have to deal with, but at the same time, it just changed the dynamic of being a work leader right now. And it's not going, I don't think it's going away either. Like, I think that's one of the things that I think has been really made clear in the past, it's been 9 months since that happened. It's not going away. It's kind of static here, and you see it in a lot of things that are kind of hitting the political airwaves.
Yeah, and if it does go away, it's gonna be a decade. It's going to be 15 years.
It's not like a 6-month thing, right? Yeah.
No, they call the 60s the 60s for a reason, right? There was a zeitgeist and a gestalt, if you will, that kind of paints what was going on in the 60s and the 70s, and here we are in the 2020s, and it definitely has a flavor, right?
Zeitgeist we're on a journey here. So.
Yeah. Now, that being said, there are some things that I would change, again, just to, put it in context, leading up to, Roe v. Wade being overturned. We had started to establish a pattern of, I had specifically, of responding to things that happened, out in the world, like the George Floyd, murder and stuff like that. And even saying George Floyd murder, using that phrase, back then was a political statement, right?
Yes,
to say
absolutely.
that George Floyd was murdered was, people knew what your politics were if you said it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there was, kind of I think, if I put it all in context, and I do have some advice about this, by the way, based on my own experience, I know you do as well. But if I put it all in context, I think a lot of it was driven by the pandemic. And what I mean is that when the pandemic really started in earnest, at the beginning of 2020 or, kind of tilting into the second quarter of 2020, businesses interacted with people's personal lives and with social issues and health issues in a way that was unprecedented. And so it became, more common, even expected, that your company was going to play a significant role in how you were dealing with the pandemic, how you responded to it. What your point of view or perspective was on it, or, also the type of job you had, were you expected to show up at, an assembly line, or were you expected to show up in an office or whatever? That was going to have an impact as well. But that really started to break down, these invisible walls between what companies could and should, talk about and engage with employees on, and what they shouldn't. I think it became a much more, hey, we're in this together, and we need to figure stuff out as we go along, because we've never experienced anything like this kind of world. And so as you start to layer all of the things that had a significant impact on our mental health, and, just kind of on our, view of, is the world in a good place or not? You've got a base layer of like social injustice, a base layer of like pandemic, and then you've got, just this event and that event and murder hornets and asteroids and, all this shit. And it just all starts to pile up. And I think because of some of the reflexes that we developed during the pandemic, we suddenly felt like it was necessary to address nearly every significant event that happened out in the world. And so we kind of got into this real, pattern. Well, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I didn't really say anything about it initially, because I really felt like it did transcend, a lot of, kind of what could be classified, I guess, as social issues, or, neatly packaged as, social injustice or health crisis, or, whatever. And I was like, man, this one's different. I don't really want to, respond to this. And then I started getting a lot of emails and, people pulling me aside and talk to me like, you really need to address this. You really, I'm like, well, what am I, like we're addressing it on an individual basis, right? We're, talking to people about healthcare and, our commitment to, their relationship with our organization and our commitment to them in terms of how we'll provide for their healthcare. But that wasn't, first of all, that's not visible, and everybody wanted to know where you stood. And so I thought about it, and I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. It's like, I can't, carry the weight of, defining the company's position on a topic as if it were the only right position, and as if everyone would be held to that standard, because I believe that it ran counter to your point of how I live my life and, how I started this agency and this company, which is I've got a truly, and people say this, and I don't know that, people say it even when it's not true. When I say it, it's true. I've got friends from all sides of the political spectrum, and they're truly my friends. And I love nothing more than a good conversation with someone who disagrees with me. And I won't tolerate it unless they truly believe it, because it's not meaningful just to debate with somebody who doesn't fucking believe anything. I don't really get any juice from talking to people who agree with me about stuff in terms of what am I going to learn from that? Just a new way to defend what I already believe. And so I was like, fuck it. That's what I believe in. I believe in a big tent. I believe in, people from, with different perspectives coming together, and talking about it. So, and that's what I put out, and, to, varying, degrees of, acceptance and rejection. But this is the part that I would have done differently. The insights that I had, I wish that I'd developed before something like, the Roe v. Wade, reversal came into being, which is it became really clear to me that I didn't think our organization needed to take or should take political stances on every issue out in the world. At the same time, I also came to believe that it was untenable to ask people not to have opinions or talk about their opinions or whatever. And so you and I had lots of conversations about this notion of don't block the streets and sidewalks. It's like freedom of speech, protest, et cetera, all that's legal. It becomes illegal literally when you block the streets or block the sidewalks or interfere with just the everyday workings of society unless you have a permit. Right. And so I'm like, where are the streets and sidewalks inside organizations? So don't get on the fucking intercom and say Obama sucks, because that's that's not on the street and sidewalks. That's like interfering with work systems and how work gets done. So establishing, places where people can have those conversations. I wish that all of that had been in place prior to, the moment of need. That's the thing so my advice would be, think about where people should have these conversations, because we've seen tons of examples in companies like Microsoft and stuff like that, where basically saying, hey, you can't talk about this shit at all is not, that truly pisses everyone off. Right. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a way to unite people against you, you can never talk about any of this stuff. Even if you've got an interest group that people are like, no, you can't talk about that anymore. That's a great way to unite people. Not in the way that you want it.
That's the one thing that people can agree on. It's like, oh, we fucking hate that guy.
Yeah, we don't like this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think there's, I think the other thing we talked about too, which I'll bring up again, is there's some of these, kind of the sidewalk overflow issues, where sort of the dam bursts on some of those things. And I think the calculus, I don't know. I mean, maybe lightly that maybe we underestimated, but lots of organizations, I think, underestimated on Roe v. Wade, was that this was a sidewalk overflowing into the streets sort of thing. There wasn't enough room for people on the sidewalks to do this. I mean, it was a very visceral thing. And I think when you roll back something that's been the norm for 50 years, yeah, I mean, that's understandable. No matter what side, you're on, you could understand sort of the human nature of big changes like this, especially after the last 3 years, So, yeah, I mean, I get it. So I think it's sort of that squeezing the sand or the water in your hand, and you just keep restricting and you just keep losing control and mass over how much you can do. So like trying to sort of keep that, keep some, I think we do a pretty good job here of talking about principles rather than like rules. And so like keeping the principles of, streets and sidewalks is sort of a principle, but there's going to be times where shit spills out in the streets. I mean, we knew it because our clients are pretty apolitical, but everybody was talking about it for like 2 weeks. Yeah. Everybody. Well, like they were bringing up, what do you do? In those situations,
well,
right?
That's a great point too. No matter what you have in place, there are going to be anomalous events, times, circumstances, et cetera, where the best laid plans, the best systems, the best principles, the best processes, are not going to apply, to the level of engagement and response that you have around, a particular happening or, issue. And I do think that it's the principles as opposed to rules that at least give you a better starting point for how to handle the next thing, because you can't plan for everything. So, let's just get really specific. Let's take this Bud Light controversy, for instance. Again, these are things that nobody wants to talk about in the context of how, companies actually operate and work actually gets done, because, it's even fucking talking about it, you're putting yourself at risk, right? And fortunately, I don't care too much about that. But you've got, Bud Light, who, by the way, for all you marketers out there, don't you fucking hate it when they pin it all on the marketer?
Always.
It's like,
of course, that's who they took the fall on it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, come on. And so Bud Light, basically pays to sponsor, I think it was a TikTok campaign. It was a social media campaign. I believe it was a TikTok campaign for Dylan Mulvaney, who is a transgender woman who basically documented her transition over, a year-long period. And Bud Light creates, some commemorative cans with her picture on them, sends them to her, and sponsors a couple of posts, and chaos ensues, right? And so I was just curious, what have you heard about? So we know the impact on, customers. We know that, 15% drop in sales. We know that it's become like a touchstone issue inside bars. Where,
that's right.
I just read that article today, the bar that basically said, you just can't talk about this anymore. And if you talk about it, we're going to kick you out. We only tolerate tolerance here. We have no tolerance for intolerance. That's right. And just fucking great. But what about the employees? I mean, are they experiencing a similar situation with employees who are like, I don't want to be part of a company who has these views or does these things? And by the way, as you're answering that, isn't it also interesting that Bud Light and Budweiser have been, supporting, the gay community for a long time? They've got these, rainbow commemorative bottles that are released during Pride Month and, stuff like that. I should say the TQ, man, I'm so fucking bad at that. And which again, that's probably why people think I'm a fucking uber conservative, because I trip, words. But they've got this long history of supporting, different communities on the margins a lot of times. And here, this one, for whatever reason, because of the zeitgeist, where, trans issues have become just an outsized, it's like less than 1% of the population, but dominating 80% of, the legislative agenda. Right. It's like, it's fucking crazy. So what, are employees having a negative reaction, and are they just waking up to the fact that, Budweiser's been doing this. Anheuser-Busch has been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not a problem when nobody hears about it, or it's not publicized. When it's featured on Tucker Carlson, R.I.P. Not really R.I.P. But like when it's on, like when it's national news. This is where I feel like really having like a holistic view of the employee experience and thinking about the extended enterprise. Learning organizations have been talking about this for years, but thinking about the impact of distributors and their employees, people that stock shelves, people, like to your point, that run bars that have to like deal with the fallout from this shit. They don't work for Budweiser. None of them, like most of the people that are doing that are bringing Budweiser to market, to your shelves, they're not employees, but they're being impacted by it. So like it actually becomes everybody's like problem in that case. And so it's one of those things where if you hit the news cycle just right on some of this stuff, it's going to make even employees who agree with it say like, boy, but could we have done something different, or maybe just at a different time? Could we have, could we have let this calm down? And so, and then nobody's happy with the response from Budweiser either. If you got to stand by it, you're going to lose a certain element of your audience. And Bud Light, Budweiser is supposed to be a broad consumer branded product that should be drank by anybody with bad taste.
I think that was the mistake, by the way. Yeah. The mistake is, it's one thing if you are, a niche product or, not a, kind of a market leading product. To put this in perspective, Anheuser-Busch, huge company, a market leader. And yet they still have to grow, right? They have to grow a little bit here, a little bit there, grow profits, grow market share, grow revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I could see how, in the cycle of, multiple years of planning, they say, well, our growth is really dependent upon developing deeper relationships with, kind of niche communities. But when those niche communities are basically starting to conflict with each other from an attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs perspective, they're putting their mainstream, kind of business plan, their mainstream revenue streams, et cetera, at risk, then it's a dumb business decision. If you're a niche product and you're looking for an advantage over a mainstream product, and it also, has the additional benefit of being something that you truly believe in, then that can be a really good and powerful, business plan as well, where you run.
I got to follow up on that. So if they don't do this with, one of their two named, they're Budweiser's sort of number one, Bud Light's number two. If they do that without that, like they do with one of their subsidiary brands, one of their craft brands or whatever, do the same exact thing.
Yeah.
But just with the smaller thing, do you think because people have to take those two steps, they have to recognize that this is a brand they no longer want to identify with. They might not even be familiar with it, because if you have a niche enough product, it might not be something that even, hits their shelves or anything that along those lines. So they have to take a second step to say like, oh, this is Budweiser. So now I'm going to go against Budweiser, versus like having sort of that flagship brand and do it. So taking that like from I guess we're looking at sort of the brand impact there. The difference there is where it's at.
Yeah. So I don't think we'd be talking about it today if they'd done it with, a niche brand. And I also think, by the way, if you look at the relationship between employee experience and customer experience and shareholder experience, I also think it would have given people inside the organization an opportunity to work on a project that they really cared about, where you start to see the match in attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs between, the employees who are working on the product, the consumers who consume the product, and the shareholders who benefit from the product. So I think that stuff can be really good. The problem here is that Bud Light has the word Bud in it, and everybody knows it's associated with Anheuser-Busch. And, in the moment that we're in right now, that's a hot button, issue. I think probably no one at, as part of this Bud Light marketing strategy, would have ever assumed that anyone other than the audience that they were targeting with this particular content would ever have even known that, it was occurring or that it happened. Who outside of, Dylan Mulvaney's followers even knew that Dylan Mulvaney existed until, the controversy broke open on this, situation. And right. So, and then you don't, and to go back to the big picture of like the mainstream brand. And you can't fix this by showing a commercial about America and horses, which is like the next move. It's like, oh wait, we don't believe that. We believe this, That's right. It's like, well, what do you believe?
That's right.
And, I don't think it's this, I'll ask you, do you think that, this gets to the heart of the matter. Should they just shut up and make beer?
Well, that's one way to do it. I think the other way is, there's probably, I'm guessing, I don't know this for sure. I bet you there's a marketing agency that is working right now on a way to lean in to the mistake. However you want to characterize that mistake. There's somebody working on a Super Bowl commercial for next February.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be like, we got this in the can. Like, let's just go out, with this thing, making fun of ourselves, like for this, and something that kind of brings it back to the mainstream of saying like, yeah, even Bud Light knew they maybe made some missteps there. There's definitely that. There's also definitely the fact that you just kind of lean into, you could say like, hey, we're evolving just like everybody else. You could explain it, but like, that's not something that people usually consume really well.
Yeah. Well, and I'll answer my own question as well, which is no, I don't think they should shut up and make beer. And here's why. Their beer fucking sucks. And it is just like a bunch of beer that fucking sucks. Right. Coors Light, Bud Light. All these beers suck. They taste awful. Like if people were drinking this beer because they thought it was like the best beer ever in the world, then they just have bad taste. It's not why people drink, Bud Light or whatever, which essentially means it's a lifestyle brand. They're not selling it based on the taste. They're selling it based on the way people identify with the brand. And they identify with a brand because, social learning theory would teach us that they learn to consume this brand from trusted others, and trusted others typically choose brands within a social circle that also shares similar attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs. So no, they shouldn't shut up and make beer. But I think when they are attaching, attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs and lifestyle components to their brand, they really need to be sensitive to, is this a lifestyle that, could be broadly applied to everyone within our consumer base? Or is it one that, basically says some people are right and some people are wrong, and starts to, kind of take more of a, political social stance. Right. And I think as a mainstream brand, that's probably not even a mainstream lifestyle brand. Everyone can get behind, fucking drinking a beer next to a babbling brook or a roaring, river while you're catching salmon or whatever. When I say everybody, all kinds of people love to fish and go to the outdoors, And so Subaru, if you love dogs and you love the outdoors, you're going to love Subaru, right? Okay. That's something a bunch of different groups can connect to. It seems probably like you are intentionally cutting out, a portion of your employees, a portion of your consumer base, and really putting your shareholder results at risk when you start to choose lifestyle positions that are not, broadly identifiable. And I don't like. I'm just talking. I don't have a strong position on this stuff. I'm just trying to figure it out as we go along, like everybody else.
Well, one of the things. And I'll ask the question to you too, because I had a really visceral reaction about them suspending the marketing people for this, because not just out of self-interest, but because you are, I mean, I think to your point, you're paid to sort of figure out where's your next lifetime customer going to come from. And it's not going to be from existing stock of folks that are already drinkers, right? So like, who are you going to appeal to? And to your point, I mean, like niche marketing has been around forever. How can you best deploy that? How much of this could be anticipated is really my question. Like, so like go back in time to, probably January, February when this was being developed. It was launched in March. So there was a bunch of prep that went into that. Nobody thought this is going to get any traction outside of, like you said, those communities. Nobody else pulled back on that and said, well, wow, this is a real bad time to do this. It was kind of just like it feels like a bad timing moment. And it's also like a good way, I feel like, to, I think really make a poor employee experience for your folks, because it means nobody's allowed to make, honest mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Things that, I mean, really, like even on the risk side of things, pre this happening, I would have been like, like we might get a little bit of static, but like it's not gonna be that much, right? I mean, like person has a lot of TikTok followers, but lots of people have lots of followers,
mm-hmm.
and it's just it's not anything. It's like one beer can that we sent over with their face on it. Just seems like This seems like a nice little like, hey, this is cool. Congratulations. We want to be participants in this. Special moment, and help your fans connect with us as well. Just like sponsor your parade, just like doing all this stuff. But like I said, that didn't get the attention that this singular instance got. So I don't know. No. It felt like that's probably one of the tougher things too, is like long term, can I see myself like putting out anything in the future that is anything close to risk taking, even if it's a good calculation, even if the risk profile is even lower than what that was, I'm gonna be a lot more hesitant. I think that's bad for Budweiser, universally.
Yeah, I agree. And, speaking of terrible employers and a bad employee experience, you mentioned Tucker Carlson and Fox. I mean,
right.
And this is, I'm bringing this up because I think that we're having something done to us as a society. And dare I tilt into what some people would consider conspiracy theory, because it's not conspiracy theory. It's like algorithms. Like algorithms are real, y'all. That's not a conspiracy theory. The content that you get served is based on the content that, algorithms will think is compelling to you based on content that you have consumed in the past. And so if you start to get in an echo chamber of content, you are likely to develop a certain set of attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs, and sometimes lose the trail on the truth just a little bit. It happens to all of us. I've said this a million times. I wake up every day and I read, I've got a big wide monitor and I open CNN on one side and Fox on the other. And I scan through all the headlines on both sides just to kind of get a sense of, the different portrayal of news events, but also what news events are selected based on the demographics that are, being promoted to. And when I'm on Fox, for instance, I have, despite the fact that I'm a close reader, have sometimes accidentally clicked on an ad that I thought was an article and gotten halfway through it before I'm like, oh, wait, shit, this is not true. This is like, some kind of like clickbait article that I've accidentally fallen into. It's happened to me on other sites, but that advertising style is very prevalent on Fox if you've been on Fox.
For sure, yeah.
And so here's the deal. I fucking hate Tucker Carlson, but I also hate Don Lemon. I hate both of them. And I hate them both because they're doing something to us. They are taking things like the news and using it to polarize people against one another. And it's like, you're either with me or you're against me. And I'm old school when it comes to news. It's like, report the fucking news, especially if you're in a prime time slot on a news network. Try reporting the news, not using every, article as a way to beat people over the head with what they ought to think about and how they ought to feel and what their opinions are. And so I feel like all of this stuff is related in so much as we are being taught to distrust one another based on our social values and our political beliefs and et cetera, et cetera. And what fucking good is it doing us? What good is it doing us? Is it making the world a better place? Because if it is, I don't see it. All I see is people yelling at each other. In Texas, they're pulling out guns and shooting each other in traffic.
Oh my God.
You know, it's like, I don't see where the good part of, you know, this heightened polarization, you know, is happening. I just don't see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good point too, because it's something that I've noticed too. I don't consume the news the way you do. I kind of just take a very local approach and kind of let the big stories kind of filter down a little bit. But you know, I think there's also something to be said about, to your point, the algorithms and sort of being like terminally online or plugged into cable news, like whatever sort of your medium is for consuming stuff this way. I mean, I feel like it feels very much like, I love this insult, but just like go out and touch grass and like get away, like get some perspective on what's going on in the world and how you relate to other people. I think so. I'm trying to pull this back around to the employee experience, because I think you're right. I mean, I think it's like I've worked great. I mean, my whole family is more conservative than I am. I have great relationships with my family, and so doesn't bother. I mean, some of the things they say bother me, but they don't bother me on a regular. I don't think about it. I don't obsess about how they might see the world differently than I do, because I touch grass once in a while. You know, I mean, I think that's a big challenge, though, because everything that you know, we think about. I mean, we think about this on the work tech side of things. It's like how to keep people like engaged throughout the day, and then you know when they switch off their work tech and they go to their consumer tech, it's all about keeping you engaged. You know, scrolling one more time, consuming one more thing too, and there's a real risk of manipulation there. I think you're right. I mean, news networks, social media are like very incentivized to do that stuff, right? They want to keep you on for the next commercial break. They want to keep you on for the next ad that shows up in your feed. So yeah, it's not. I don't want to be a participant in that sort of world either. So like, it's real tough. I mean, it's a tough place to compete against as a work leader. To compete against that world in a really honest way without also going down these paths of manipulation. So I'd say like that, like we can't fight fire with fire. We can't go down manipulative algorithms for your work tech feed the same way you would with a consumer thing. You have to play fair, and not. I mean, I'm really resistant to that.
Well, and slap some artificial intelligence on those algorithms, and you know, all resource constraints around producing as much, you know, content as, you know, as necessary, and optimizing it can happen in near real time. And so my point there, and I think this is the bigger point that I would like to make, not assuming that you agree with me, not assuming that you don't, but the bigger point that I would make is this is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And for most organizations, I think that the winning play here is to think about inclusion and think about diversity and think about equity in a slightly different way than you know, I think that we are, you know, have been trained to think about it in the past, which is, you know, it's okay for people to disagree. It's okay for people to have different belief systems. It's okay for them to talk about what they agree with and what they disagree with. And it's okay for people to get mad, and it's okay for people to argue. All of those things are like normal human things. You can't disenfranchise an entire group of people based on their opinion on or their attitudes, behaviors, and beliefs around any, you know, particular issue, because it's just going to become more and more isolated in terms of an organization's ability to be successful and effective, and in terms of the impact that as employers and companies we have on society as a whole, where society thrives on, you know, people working together to get shit done. Society doesn't thrive on everyone trying to, you know, foil everyone, you know, all the time. And so I just think it's a game in many ways that unless you are a consumer brand that has a very, strong vision in that is built from the ground up on, one specific issue or another, I think it makes a lot of sense for Patagonia to be Patagonia, company we've talked about a lot. Makes perfect sense. Everybody's on the same page. Employees, customers, and shareholders makes a lot of sense.
From the start, Bo. They were that way from the start, to your point.
Yeah, from the start. For other organizations, I mean, trying to, become a Patagonia or, whatever the opposite of Patagonia is when what you do for a living has nothing to do with that. And that's not, the backstory or, of how you were created. I mean, I think it's just eject from it and, create the streets and sidewalks for people to be people and have the conversations they're going to have. But taking a position that you don't agree on because you think it's expedient from a business perspective, whether it's to gain market share, whether it's to appeal to the majority of your employees because you did a survey and found out that 73% are this and 12% are that, that shit will bite you in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, I think the approach here that you're talking about is right. And so, even you have different outcomes. If you're taking sort of approach, not doing the thing that's marketing, not doing the thing that's good PR, but doing the thing that's, leans into your values and your vision, your mission. Even if and I think the hardest thing to do is to correct that when it goes off the rails too. But I mean, I don't think anybody makes mistakes when you do that. I mean, I think there's some mistakes you can do in executing that. But when you're kind of having that as the core of why you're doing this and how you're trying to do that, I also think, and I think we close out with this thought too, I think that also gives you a little bit of slack to make some of those smaller errors that you will inevitably make when you're communicating things like this, right? So if Patagonia makes a mistake on something sustainability wise, they get a pass for a few mess ups because we know that's where their head is at. But if I don't know, if a big consumer, if Procter and Gamble says the same thing, I'm like, yeah, maybe you don't actually believe that.
Yeah, I mean, if Patagonia loaded all their shit onto a tanker and that fucking tanker, blew up in the middle of the ocean and created an oil spill, and Patagonia came out and said it was a mistake, we have no idea how our clothes got on that tanker, and we are, pro environment, and that will never happen again, everyone would believe them. If you're Exxon and you have a leaky, tanker, and they show you fucking cleaning a bunch of birds with, Palmolive, and you say we're, dedicated to the environment, and this is never going to happen again, everyone's like, yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, it's like you never get in trouble for making mistakes. You get in trouble for lying.
That's right.
And not being true to yourself. Well, I enjoyed the conversation.
Me too.
And I look forward to talking again. Let's do it again next week.
Unless we're canceled.
Yeah, unless we're canceled. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see. It'll be my fault. But
if not, we'll see you next week.
Yeah. See you next week. Deal.